Good afternoon. Hope everybody has had a good day so far. Uh, Today is November 22nd, 2023, and this is Thanksgiving weekend. It's also the 60th anniversary of uh, the assassination of President John F. Kennedy in Dallas. Anybody who's old enough, for the most part, can tell you exactly where they were when they got the news about the assassination. If you weren't born yet, or if you were too young to be aware of current events, then uh, you would you wouldn't be able to say. At 8:45 that morning, President John F. Kennedy, a Democrat, spoke before breakfast in a square across 8th Street in Fort Worth. He had spent the night at a hotel in Fort Worth. The attendees were members of the Fort Worth Chamber of Commerce, largely conservative Republicans. And at 9:10 a.m., he took his place in the Hotel Texas Grand Ballroom for a scheduled speech. And then at 10:40 a.m., his motorcade departed Hotel Texas in Fort Worth for Carswell Air Force Base. 11:20, Air Force One departed Carswell for Dallas. 11:35, just 15 minutes later, they arrived at Love Field. And then the Kennedys and the Conleys, that is President John F. Kennedy and his wife Jackie Kennedy, along with Texas Governor John Connally and his wife Nellie, they disembarked Air Force One and are greeted by the Johnsons, Lyndon Baines Johnson, then vice president, along with his wife Lady Bird. And why was he in Texas in the first place? Well, it was a campaign stop. He was expecting to run for re-election in 1964. And he had carried Texas 4 years earlier, but he was concerned about opposition he might face. And it is quite significant that he was riding in the same vehicle with the conservative Democrat John Connally, governor of Texas, rather than with the liberal U.S. Senator from Texas, Ralph Yarborough. Yarborough was riding in the car behind Kennedy and Connally, along with Vice President Johnson. Perhaps I'll do a video about Ralph Yarborough sometime. I met him in Austin in 1983, and he was truly a remarkable man, a wonderful U.S. Senator. We hadn't seen the likes of Ralph Yarborough in many years. And at 11:55, the motorcade does not depart Love Field until about 15 minutes after the party had arrived there, as the president and his wife were taking time to shake hands with many of their enthusiastic supporters. The motorcade then left Love Field for its 10-mile drive through downtown Dallas. The motorcade route took a left turn from the south end of Love Field to West Mockingbird Lane, continued through to central Dallas. Then it progressed down Main Street. At 12:29 p.m., the motorcade turned right westbound on Houston Street fatefully entering Dealey Plaza. The motorcade then approached the Texas School Book Depository. At 12:30, the motorcade made a sharp 135-degree left turn onto Elm Street, a downward sloping road. The giant Hertz rent-a-car clock on top of the depository building was seen to change from 12:29 to 12:30 as the limousine turned onto Elm Street. At that point, witnesses recall the first shot was fired after the president had started waving his right hand. Onlookers recalled hearing three shots. The Zapruder film shows the president reemerging after being temporarily hid from view by the Stemmons Freeway sign at film frames 215 to 223. His mouth has already opened wide in an anguished expression. He's already been impacted by a bullet that struck him in the throat, another in his mid-back, with his hands clenched into fists. And as the limousine began speeding up, Mrs. Kennedy was heard to scream. She climbed onto the rear of the limo. At that same time, there was one Secret Service agent by the name of Clint Hill. He got in the car, and the Conleys recalled hearing Mrs. Kennedy say, "I have his brains in my hand." And at 12:34 p.m., the First United Press International (UPI) bulletin states that the three shots were fired today at the president's motorcade in downtown Dallas. 12:36, President Kennedy's limousine arrives at Parkland Memorial Hospital. Parkland Hospital admitted Kennedy and Conley, immediately began treatment. Malcolm Perry, assistant professor of surgery at UT Southwestern Medical Center and a vascular surgeon, was the first to treat Kennedy. Other doctors and surgeons worked frantically to save the president's life. Today, I just watched a video of an interview several years ago with Dr. Philip E. Williams, a Dallas neurologist, who in 1963 was 23 years old intern who was on duty that day when the president came in, and he had vivid recollections of it. I met him on one occasion because in 1987, I took my wife to him. I never will forget his assuring words. He said, "Now, I'm a surgeon. You do not need surgery." That was a blessing. He was a neurosurgeon. He referred her to a neurologist for the treatment she needed, from which she benefited. But anyway, I was impressed favorably with Dr. Williams that one time I met him. It was years later that I learned he was one of the interns on duty when the president arrived at the hospital. And at 1 p.m., President Kennedy is officially pronounced dead. Those who had treated him observed the president's condition as moribund, meaning he had no chance of survival upon arrival at the hospital. Dr. Williams was asked, obviously the medical technology in the last 60 years has made tremendous progress. There's a lot more available today than there was in 1963. But he was, with the type of wounds that he experienced, there still would be, he would not be able to survive even with modern technology. Dr. Williams said that we've made a lot of progress. We can do heart transplants, kidney transplants, We're a long way from doing brain transplants. And anyway, based on the U.S. Constitution, the moment he died, Vice President Lyndon Johnson became president, although he had not officially been sworn in. And it was shortly after that Judge Sarah T. Hughes of Dallas was the one who swore LBJ in as president on Air Force One. Here's a picture of the motorcade that day. I was 12 years old at that time, and I have something I greatly treasure, a t-shirt well worn from West Junior High in Waco. On the back is our mascot, the Yellow Jackets. West Junior no longer exists. According to this t-shirt, it started in 1914, ended in 1973. Closed that year. That for many years there was nothing left there except the outdoor gym and the band hall. Band hall was used as an office by the Waco Council of Campfire. Today there's another school at that site, West Avenue Elementary. But I remember being in English class, November 22nd, 1963. That was 60 years ago today. I was 12 years old at the time. I'm now 72 by the grace of God. Okay, I was sitting in English class taught by Mrs. A. Johnson. There were about 4 different teachers on campus named Johnson, and so that's why we had designated by a letter of the first name. No form of the verb to be ever takes an object. That was her daily mantra. But anyway, T.W. Carpenter, our principal, came over the loudspeaker that day when we were in English class and said, "Our state and nation has suffered a tragedy. President Kennedy and Governor Connally have both been shot in Dallas, and President Kennedy is not expected to live." School was dismissed early. We all went home. And I remember that weekend, that was a Friday. Friday night, all day Saturday, all day Sunday. There was nothing on television except stuff related to Kennedy. I recently talked with a Dallas police officer who several years younger than me, who grew up in Dallas, and he recalled as a child, his main memory of it was that they, on that Saturday morning, there was no cartoons on TV. Well, of course, by that time in my life, I was beyond the cartoon stage. I already had an interest in history and politics, and I found the stuff on television about Kennedy to be very interesting. And on the following Monday, after the funeral, the regular programming resumed. Now, President Kennedy died approximately 1 p.m. in Dallas, Central Standard Time. Lee Harvey Oswald reportedly killed a Dallas police officer by the name of J.D. Tippit. And he was traveling on foot toward the Texas Theater on West Jefferson Boulevard. About 1:35, John Calvin Brewer, the manager of Hardy's Shoe Store, saw Oswald turning his face away from the street and ducking an entranceway of Brewer's store as the Dallas police cars approached with sirens audible. When Oswald left the store, Brewer followed him and watched him enter the Texas Theater without paying, while the ticket attendant, Julie Postal, was distracted. Anchorman Walter Cronkite reported at 1:35 the official word that Kennedy was dead and that LBJ was to be sworn in as president. Johnson phoned Attorney General Robert Kennedy to express his condolences and ask where he should take the oath of office. And I remember when Kennedy became president, he appointed his younger brother, Bobby, as Attorney General to his cabinet. And he said, well, he was a young lawyer and he wanted to give him some experience. The highest lawyer in the country. And at 1:51 p.m., the police reported Lee Harvey Oswald was in custody. At 2 o'clock, Kennedy's body was removed from Parkland and driven to Air Force One at Love Field. The removal occurred after an angry confrontation between Kennedy's Special Assistant Ken O'Donnell, backed by Secret Service agents and doctors, including medical examiner Earl Rose, along with the Justice of the Peace. What they did may have been illegal according to Texas state law because it occurred before a forensic exam could be performed by the Dallas coroner. And at 2:13, police found the weapon used to kill the president on the 6th floor of the Texas School Book Depository. 2:30 p.m., Oswald, interrogated for almost 12 hours, he said he had nothing to do with the assassination. Shown pictures of him holding a rifle, Oswald sneered, saying that they were fake photographs taken by the police that they had superimposed upon the photographs. Come here.
What are you doing, Papa?
Just wave. That's my great-grandson, Malachi. Go back in yonder and shut the door. I'll play with you a little bit, okay? He's a chip off the old block. And it's at 2:30 p.m. is when on Air Force One, federal judge Sarah T. Hughes swore in Lyndon Baines Johnson as president of the United States. 2:47, Air Force One departed Love Field for Washington, D.C. 7:05, Oswald was charged with murder with malice for the killing of police officer J.D. Tippit. Then at 11:26 p.m., he was charged with the murder of President Kennedy. On the following day, November 23rd, military pallbearers carried the flag-draped coffin into the East Room of the White House, where he lay in repose for 24 hours. The new president issued Presidential Proclamation 3561, declaring Monday to be a day of mourning, only essential emergency workers to be at their post. And I remember, there was a special issue of the Dallas Morning News that was published on November 23rd of 1963. A reprint of that came out 10 years ago in 2013 and to mark the 50th anniversary of the assassination. At the time, I was living in Ennis and pastor of Wayman Chapel, AME Church, where I served for 14 years. I went to Ennis Walmart and bought a copy of that paper for $5. I don't have it with me right now. I wish I did. I know it's in a file in my office at the church at Bethel, Corsicana, but I didn't have time to go by there and pick it up. But anyway, that's certainly a collector's item. I reread it and I remembered some of the stuff I didn't. Between the age of 12 and the age of 62, a lot of things change. Then November 24th, it was 11:21 a.m. before live television cameras. Oswald was shot and mortally wounded in the basement of Dallas Police Headquarters by a local nightclub owner with alleged mafia ties named Jacob Rubenstein, who was from Chicago, but who had changed his name to Jack Ruby. Oswald was put into an ambulance and rushed to Parkland Hospital. He died at 1:07 p.m. And by the way, Dr. Williams was asked why they even treated Oswald. He said, as physicians, that's their responsibility, morally speaking, to treat anybody who comes in. They've had gangsters, they've had criminals, they've had all kinds of shady characters come into the emergency room, and even showed the log of patients, and there were a lot of patients in the emergency room on November 22nd. Among the patients listed is John F. Kennedy and John Conley. And for November 24th, Lee Harvey Oswald was listed. This was in 1963. It wasn't until February 7th of 1965 that I went forward and made a public profession of faith in Jesus Christ as my Savior and began actively participating in church. I was baptized May 2nd, 1965. Got my call to the ministry on April 21st, April 14th, 1966, and delivered my first sermon on October 26, 1966 at the age of 15. So it's been quite a journey. But the journey hadn't started yet. So on Sunday morning, November 24th, 1963, I was sitting at home that Sunday morning in front of the TV set and actually witnessed Lee Harvey Oswald being gunned down by Jack Ruby. There's no question Jack Ruby had connections to get through a police line like that and to be able to do what he did. They didn't have the kind of security they have, so it would be unlikely that would happen today. But Ruby was sentenced to death, and his appeal dragged on for a while, and eventually he passed away. He died of, I think it was shortly after he went to prison that he was diagnosed with cancer, and eventually he died of cancer while incarcerated. But here's a picture right here of Oswald being escorted by a Dallas police officer by the name of Elmer Boyd, nicknamed Sonny Boyd. And he was a native of Blooming Grove in Navarro County. I was pastor in Blooming Grove from 96 to 99. After he retired from Dallas PD, he eventually moved back to Blooming Grove. I think he moved back in 99. So we narrowly missed each other. But it's my understanding that on that Sunday, he worked like till 3 a.m. that morning. And he went to his mother-in-law's house for lunch and got a call from his supervisor telling him that Oswald had been shot. He had to come back to work. Sonny Boyd is a very fine man. He's still living today. And he's a Mason like I am. And recently I attended a meeting at Blooming Grove Lodge, and I had the pleasure of meeting him. Here's a picture of us together. I treasure this encounter. When I asked him if I could take a picture with him, he said, sure. He said, you want me to stand up? I said, no, Brother Boyd, you don't need to stand up. I think he's in his 90s now, and he's just really a very remarkable man. And he's the only one of the Dallas police that was involved in the transporting of Oswald who is still living. And Kennedy's coffin was carried on that Sunday on a horse-drawn caisson to the Capitol to Lyon State. And throughout the day and night, hundreds of thousands lined up to view the guarded casket, with 250,000 passing through the rotunda during the 8 hours of lying in state. Then on Monday, November 25th, Kennedy's funeral service was held. Go ahead. Was held at St. Matthew's Cathedral. The Requiem Mass was led by Cardinal Richard Cushing. Shut the door. About 1,200 guests, including representatives from over 90 countries, attended. After the service, Kennedy was buried at Arlington National Cemetery in Arlington, Virginia. And again, most everybody old enough can remember where they were. And there's been a lot of speculation about what would have happened if he hadn't. I think I better bring this to a close. Hope you've enjoyed this video. Happy Thanksgiving.